Hi there, thank you for joining me for the latest edition of Telile 24/7. I'm your host, Adam Cook. This week we have a packed show for you. I'll be speaking to officials with Richmond County and the Town of Port Hawkesbury about how municipal elections will be carried out in these communities during the time of COVID-19. I'll also be speaking to a couple of organizers of a recent graduation celebration in Richmond County and how that could have an impact on the way not only grad celebrations take place in the future, but how school itself takes place and the atmosphere in which students go into the building. But we begin this week with the answer to a question that has followed Richmond Municipal councillors around for the better part of 5 years. It turns out that we won't be seeing Richmond County residents getting a choice this fall as to whether they'd prefer to continue with the warden system of municipal leadership or whether they'd rather elect a mayor at large for Richmond County. According to Richmond CAO Don Marchand, councillors have decided to put aside the idea of leaving that question up to voters as part of this fall's municipal elections. You might be wondering how we got to this point. Well, the concept of a mayoral system for Richmond County was first floated in 2015 during public hearings that were designed to determine whether Richmond Council should shrink from 10 districts down to 7 or 5. Early in 2016, a majority of councillors voted in favor of installing a mayoral system by the time the fall elections came around. However, that vote came a month after the deadline put in place by the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board for such a decision to be made, and so it died on the order paper and didn't go any further in 2016. In 2018, as part of the county's efforts to update its strategic plan, Richmond officials held public consultation meetings that included a survey on whether residents preferred a mayor system to the current warden system. Approximately 400 people answered this particular part of the survey, with the grand majority of these, just over 70%, favoring the mayoral system. However, most councillors questioned this small sample size and were reluctant to push forward with full public consultations on whether the mayoral option would be the preferred option of a majority of county residents. So the mayor-warden debate seemed destined for the back burner once again. However, at the regular Richmond Council session in May, CAO Don Marchand confirmed that he had had discussions with members of the Department of Municipal Affairs to see if the mayor-warden question could go on the ballot during this fall's municipal elections in Richmond County. Marchand also pledged to speak to officials with Elections Nova Scotia on the issue and to provide an update for Council in June. With no such update coming from CAO Marchand at Richmond County's regular meeting in June or its Committee of the Whole meeting the same month, Telile 24/7 reached out to the CAO in early July to see if the issue had been resolved. Although the CAO declined my interview request, he did say that the mayor versus warden conversation was dealt with at, in his words, a previous council meeting. He added, quote, "We will not be including such a question on the ballot and consider this issue closed." When I asked him if this came to a formal motion, he replied, quote, "There was no motion made to place the mayor versus warden question on the ballot. It was a request from councillors to provide information regarding the process and cost to place the question on the ballot. It was decided that we not proceed. No vote was taken." So, if it's going to be decided at all, it will be decided by a plebiscite in the following 4 years, or it will become a ballot question in 2024. So we know that municipal elections are going to be a little different in the time of COVID-19 right here in the Strait of Canso. The question is, how are they going to work? Well, we've brought someone in to give the Richmond County perspective, and he's very familiar with municipal politics in this neck of the woods. He has served as a councillor for the former District 8, taking in the St. Peter-Sampsonville area, and he was the returning officer for the 2016 municipal elections. He's serving in that same role right now as he's getting ready for 2020's elections in October. We are pleased to have join us on Telile 24/7, Claire Rankin. Thank you for coming into the studio today, sir.
No problem, Adam.
All
Glad
right.
to be here.
Good to have you here. And I want to begin by asking you about that 2016 election, if I could, because we're talking about unusual elections in Richmond County, but that one in itself was quite a challenge because all of a sudden you had to drop from 10 districts to 5. That was the first election for the new 5-member council setup. Can you tell me what that was like?
It was a little harrowing. If you go back, like when I was first elected in '88, they had 11 districts, and then somewhere along the line, 92 or 96, they dropped one, and so it was down to 10. But to go from 10 to 5 was quite an undertaking. We had an enumeration then, door-to-door enumeration in 2016, and then I had to take all those names and look at the new boundary lines and sort people out from where they were before in 2012 and then set them into their new polling district in 2016. It was quite an ordeal, especially when you have people who are used to doing things like they always did. Like there were a couple of misfits. Grand Grave is divided into two. Half them on half the road is in St. Peter's, half the road is in number 5 Lordways. But other than that, we pull it off. There was one little snafu there at election night, but we got through it, and the councillors were duly elected, and have served since then.
So before we get to the concept that now you have to figure out how there's going to be an election during a pandemic period and quite possibly a second wave of COVID-19, let me ask you a little bit about the idea of coming back into that, knowing that at least you have the 5 districts now and you have one of these elections under your belt. Did that give you a little more confidence as you're getting into the process now and starting to prepare for that angle of it?
Well, sure. I mean, I know how the election runs now, and the biggest difference this time around is the fact that because of COVID, we weren't able to do a door-to-door enumeration, and so what we're going on is the electors list from the last provincial election in 2017, I believe. So there's going to be a lot of different people on and off the list, people who have since passed away since the last provincial election, people who have moved into the area are not supposed to be on those lists, and so that's going to be a major job for the revising officer. And that's me as well. So, yeah.
You may not have the answer to this question, but I'll ask it anyway. Is there a reason that you would go, well, nothing like a little challenge every so often. Is there a reason why it would be the provincial electors list and not the federal electors list? Because the most recent election in this part of the world would have happened in terms of the federal election in October 2019. Is there a reason you go provincial and not federal in this case?
That's a good question, and I have to say the only thing I can attribute it to is the fact that most municipalities in 2016 signed a data sharing agreement with Elections Nova Scotia, and so they were able to compile and keep the electors lists from 2016 right down to the very specific addresses and names. So they're readily available from Elections Nova Scotia. I'm not sure where those names and addresses from the federal election are kept. So no, we're all the municipalities in Nova Scotia are using what they call the Elections Nova Scotia list from the last provincial election.
Okay. Yeah. So you and your staff are going to be starting that process of making sure that those names and those addresses line up. How many staff do you typically get for your job in terms of carrying out municipal elections in Richmond County, and has that changed from 2016 to 2020?
Sure, it changed because in 2016 I had all these enumerators. I had about 35 people going around door to door all over the county, collecting names and addresses of names, from people, and they get paid by the name, so there was a lot of incentive there to knock on as many doors as you could. However, this year that's not happening, so the only staff member that'll be on from now until the election day is me. I have somebody in the municipal office, Yvonne Boudreau, who will be my coordinator in the office for ordering things and that. But as far as carrying out the election, there is a chief electoral officer for the province who's readily available for any questions or that I have or concerns. However, even that hit a snag this year, whereas the person that was appointed last year and was supposed to start in February took a leave of absence and then subsequently resigned in May, and they are just now this week appointing somebody new. So the whole scene across the province has been slowed because of that. And so we're just now, they were supposed to announce the name this week, and they're going to hit the ground believe me, hit the ground running because there's a lot of questions that have to be asked. And mostly around this revisions list. I mean, we're using a provincial list. So when I get the list, that could be your next question, I get the list, I have to break it down from the provincial polls to the municipal polls. So going back to 2016, where I had to go from 10 to 5, that was one chore. But this year, the chore will be going from what the definition of a provincial poll was and translating the names to a municipal poll. But the day of the election, we have 2 people or sometimes 3 people in every poll. And last election, I had 35 polls, so that was roughly about 100 people employed on election day.
It's one thing to say that you're taking on this challenge now, and it's quite another thing to say that you and the staff that you are going to get have to figure out how to hold a paper balloting election in a time of a pandemic where things are likely not still to be fully reopened and there is a risk of a second wave. So have you gotten any direction from the municipality in terms of how this is going to work? How do you envision this working out at this point? I know we're still early days, but what can you tell me about that?
Nobody's had any direction. To be honest, because of this chief electoral officer hasn't been appointed to give us kind of a baseline, but I can tell you from my own feelings that what's going to happen is that there's going to be more polling stations. Like, for example, in Lordways, we had 4 polls in the same hall. I can't see that working this time. So there's going to be more polls across the county for people to gather and vote in smaller groups. So that's the biggest change.
Yeah, and I imagine you could only have a specific smaller number of people in any given hall or any given room at any point.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that'll increase the number of staff, because whereas in some polls last time we only had a deputy returning officer and a poll clerk, this time we'll need somebody at the door to limit the number of people inside. So the staff will go up probably by a third again, because I'll need somebody at the door to patrol or to monitor how many people are inside the polling station.
Do you anticipate it can run smoothly? And I mean, this is asking you to project into the middle of October when this is all still coming together. Do you have a sense of optimism that this could work?
It's not a long-term commitment when you go to vote. You park, you walk in, you get your ballot, you go mark it, and you're back out of there in, less than 10 minutes, we hope. And so, no, I can see that people will adhere to the conditions we put on them. They're going to be well versed into it now, because there's so many people allowed in the grocery store. You're only allowed so many people in this store, that store. You have to wear masks, etc. So I think that people will know what the concept is and the procedure once they get to the polling station.
Okay. Yeah. I want to ask this, and I ask this only partly joking, only partly tongue-in-cheek. When you accepted the position, first let me tell you, do you apply for this, or were you contacted by the municipality? How did it turn out that you became the RO again?
There was an ad in the paper, reporter, and social media, so no, I applied.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my question then becomes, Claire Rankin, are you a sucker for punishment? You're not only doing this again, but you're doing it at a time when it is going to be quite difficult to be able to figure out how this is actually going to work. Did you look at this and say, I must be out of my mind, or did you see it as part of civic duty, or did you say, aha, a challenge? What goes to your mind when you start taking on this position again?
Look, Adam, I applied for the position 4 years ago because I was royally ticked off at what was happening at County Council. I spent 10 years around that table, and I had a lot of pride in what I did. And to see the council of 4 years ago act the way that they did really hurt me. Not only, just a lot of pride. Like, Richmond County was on national news, and I knew that there was a better way. So I wanted the job 4 years ago to do my part in trying to set things straight. And make sure the election ran, fairly efficiently, because I knew elections, and I didn't know a returning officer, but I knew enough about elections to help have a good head start on what to do then. So my real emotion, or my real reason for applying for the job 4 years ago, was that, and now it's just, now they had the experience, now they know what to do. It was kind of a moot case to apply again and try and do it again, with less trying circumstances. Although the pandemic threw another curve in the mix.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ecclesiastes, and then, of course, the birds saying to everything there is a season.
Yeah.
So you feel right now that this is your season and this is your way to be able to help the county out.
Well, they are paying me as well.
It doesn't hurt.
Yeah. So,
Ecclesiastes never said anything about that.
Yeah. There's a $200 refundable deposit you need to run as a candidate. You need 10 names on the list. You need 10 people to nominate you for a position. We always say try and get 15 because they have to be on the list in your district in order to qualify as a nominator. Other than that, you don't have to wait for a nomination day. You could announce tomorrow that you're running for council and go through start campaigning, putting up signs or press releases or knocking on doors. And I'll say, as a former councillor and somebody who's ran in 7 elections, the earlier you get out there, the better. The longer you can stay on the doorstep, the longer that you make that connection with the voter. So anybody who's contemplating running for council this fall, what's stopping you from getting out there in the summer when people are, they're glad to be outside, it's not snowing or raining, and you can spend time at the doorstep.
Last question to you, Claire, is if there's anything that needs to be done in terms of residents making sure that they're in their proper place on the electors list, that basically they're ready for this municipal election, what should they do? What would you advise them to do?
Well, I would say that if you've lived in Richmond County since 2017, then your name, you can almost ensure that your name will be on the list, and so you'll be able to vote. However, if you've recently moved to the county, or if a loved one or a relative has passed away, or if somebody you know has moved away, then they should not be on the list, and therefore you should contact the revising officer, which is me as well. However, that doesn't disqualify anybody from showing up at the poll on election day. You can walk in, and even if your name is not on the list, you're allowed to vote in Richmond County. They changed the rule 4 years ago that said you didn't have to produce ID. If you walk into the polling station and you say, I want to vote today, then you just sign an affidavit saying that you are eligible and we will give you a ballot. We don't check anything anymore. We take people on their good graces and common sense that this is where they want to vote.
And it's helpful to be able to make it that easy, because I know there have been some districts where it's been difficult to get the vote out. I know it was as low as 50% and even 47, 48% last time around. So obviously, especially during this time of pandemic, you're hopeful that that trend will turn, and whatever you folks can do to make it easier for people to vote, you certainly will.
Well, let me, brag a little bit, because in Richmond County 4 years ago, we were one of the highest turnouts in the province. And so that's one thing I'd like to repeat this time, is have it in the 70s, 70% voted in Richmond County last time. And the trend that everybody else is going around us to the electronic vote is something that we didn't consider here. We have an older population. There's a lot of connectivity issues. So we'll just have to try and get people informed and ready to go on election day.
Do you see a day, 2024 or beyond, that we might be seeing electronic voting, e-voting, or phone voting in Richmond County?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's a lot cheaper to run an election like that, and B, I think that the lowest turnout we have across the board in the province is the younger voters, and so if they everybody's got a phone today, so if they can easily pick that up and vote from their car, their home, they're walking around, then I think you'd see a higher turnout, higher percentage of younger voters voting and taking part and taking. That's a lesson in civic duty, is to vote, and so it'd be great to engage those people to have a turn at electing somebody to office.
Claire Rankin, it's been a pleasure to have you in this morning. Thank you for helping us sift through this, and we look forward to connecting with you again as we get closer to the election.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Claire Rankin is the returning officer for the second consecutive municipal election here in Richmond County. We've been speaking to him here in our Telile studios, safely and socially distanced. Stay tuned for more Telile 24/7 in just a moment. Now, the scenario is a little different in the town of Port Hawkesbury. They will have traditional paper voting, but for the first time, the town is going to give its residents the option to vote electronically through the internet or by telephone. To find out how this is all going to work and how the town made this decision, I decided to speak to the Chief Administrative Officer for the town, Terry Doyle. I caught up with him at his office in Port Hawkesbury, and I asked him to begin, when did the town get a sense that it would be time to explore electronic and phone voting options, and how did town council reach that decision?
Well, I think we've considered electronic telephone voting systems for quite some time. With COVID-19 pandemic in place and the restrictions that went along with that, we knew that we needed to look at something, an alternate way to be able to provide a safe means of electors to be able to cast their ballots. We had HRM had gone through a request for proposal process and selected a electronic telephone voting firm that would do their elections, and part of that request for proposal or the response to that was to offer that to other municipalities from the province. So at the end of May, after the award of that contract, we were able to speak with the firm in Televote and get some detailed information on how this would work. What are the benefits? What are the any cautions around it? And so, end of May, council was able to look at this and say this is a good thing for us to go forward with. So at that point in time, at the end of May, we had set a date for the first reading of this for a bylaw on the 2nd of June.
It seems to me that the concept of e-voting and phone voting got a lot of unanimous support from town council right away. Can you give me a sense of how the town council arrived at the decision they made in June to allow this process to go ahead?
It's very new to council, it's very new to staff, but we had an excellent presentation from IntelliVote that explained all of the benefits and how it would work, how simple the process would be, the many benefits of the system. When we looked at that, regardless of pandemic, it looked like a very attractive option for electors. And with the pandemic and the restrictions around that, and especially in May, not knowing how restrictions would relax, not knowing what we were going to be up against, there was a decision to move forward with that as a very safe means that anyone who is concerned about entering a polling station would have a very good option to vote.
Now, I understand that the town sought out the opinion of its residents in the run-up to passing the bylaw on e-voting and phone voting. I know there was scheduled to be a virtual public hearing before the second reading of the bylaw back in June. Can you tell us what kind of response you folks got from residents of Port Hawkesbury?
I think all the feedback we had was very positive. And so the actual second reading, where the public had a chance to present their case either for the bylaw or against the bylaw, there was no representation at that. So we didn't hear from that, but we anecdotally and with calls we were hearing good things about the moving forward.
I understand that paper voting is still going to be an option for Port Hawkesbury residents. Can you give me a sense on how that part of the operation is going to work, and what kind of discussions that town officials are having with Port Hawkesbury's returning officer, Kathy Conrad, at this time?
Yeah, so it's all very new to us, and we are moving forward. We have a lot of support from the company, from IntelliVote, as to how we move forward. The decision to council, which made it a little bit easier too, is that we still have two robust systems in place. So we have the electronic and telephone voting system in place, which will actually run for 12 days from October 6th to the end to the close of the polling station on October 17th at 7 o'clock. But we also have the full ballot, paper ballot system in place. So we have an advance poll on the Saturday before the 17th, and another advance poll on the Tuesday before election day. So there's a full system in place. So there's In that decision, there was some discussion around that, whether that was required, and some municipalities are only going with electronic and telephone voting. But as our first, I think council felt strongly that as our first venture into this initiative, that we wanted to be cautious and not to dissuade anyone from voting. So we have the two systems in place for this year.
I know we're still very early in the process, Terry, but I am wondering, what will paper voting look like in Port Hawkesbury during the time of COVID-19?
Well, one of the benefits of electronic telephone voting system is that typically most people will use that option instead of coming to the polling station. So we're told by IntelliVote that typically the maximum amount of people that would show up at a polling station would be about 20%. So we typically had 3 polls, and so this year we'll be able to have 1 poll, but we'll have within that 1 poll we'll have 2 stations, 2 deputy returning officers, 2 polling clerks, and 2 ballot boxes. So in case that system is off, I guess we'll learn for sure through this process as to how many people will show up at advance polls and at on election day. So we will have our polling station set up in the Bearhead Room at the Civic Center, both for the advance poll and for advance polls and for election day. The Civic Center, we feel, is ideally suited for that because of the size of the complex. So we can easily accommodate a number of people with social distancing in place, both in our concourse area and within the Bearhead Room. So we will put in the typical protections that we see in most businesses now, but we are still working out the details on that. But we're well suited for social distancing, getting people in out of the weather, and not having to be concerned about that, and to be able to have the benefit of a large facility that will accommodate a large number of people.
So what will the overall costs of electronic voting and phone voting be now that the town has decided to include these in this fall's municipal elections?
I think it's still coming together. I think, as I mentioned, will be similar in cost to 2016, with the addition of the cost for the electronic telephone voting system, which is still the cost of that system is based on the number of electors, and we don't have that exact number, but we feel that additional cost will be between $7,000 and $8,000.
Now, all of these discussions are unfolding as opposition has grown for the idea of having an October municipal election from 2 key lobby groups here in Nova Scotia. They are the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities and the Nova Scotia Association of Municipal Administrators. As the CAO of Port Hawkesbury, I know that you are a member of that second group. Can you give me a sense on what the positions are being held by these 2 groups and how that will impact this fall's vote?
I think things evolve. So when the announcement was made, there was many more restrictions in place. We were uncertain how COVID restrictions and measures would be put in place. There was certainly concerns of councillors being able to get out and get their message out into homes and speak to people, and so there was a lot of concerns as to how those could go forward. And I think from AMA's perspective, from NSFM's perspective, there was risk in that, and it came as a bit of a surprise maybe, and without us being able to think through what are the measures that we were going to have to put in place to be able to deliver this election safely. So in the town of Port Hawkesbury, there is some advantage. We're a relatively small area. If you look at a large rural municipality with the necessity for many polling stations throughout a county, there's a lot of challenges there. There's a lot of challenges with respect to how many people you can have in that polling station and where the electors are able to wait to get into the polling station. How do you protect our returning officer, deputy returning officer, or polling clerks, all the staff? we have an advantage here in that we don't have that geography that we have to deal with. So it's a bit easier for us to deal with one polling station versus many, as the case is for many municipalities.
Do you feel that this plan for Port Hawkesbury could hold up in the event of a second wave or further outburst of COVID-19 in Nova Scotia?
I think it's the best plan that we can put in place right now. We don't know what can happen with a second wave, or what are the restrictions that will be put in place as a result of that, the essential safety measures that will have to be put in place. So I think we are situated certainly in the opinion of council, and my opinion in the best possible way to adapt to that right now with both the electronic and telephone voting system and the paper ballot system, and a very large facility to be able to host and social isolate and do the things that we have to do.
Will more staff be required for carrying out the various aspects of this fall's municipal elections, and is that going to add to Port Hawkesbury's overall costs for staging this election? So
we will be putting out advertisements specifically around electronic and telephone voting systems. There will be every elector will be mailed instructions as to how to vote in that fashion. So we will be emphasizing that. Voter turnout is always a concern for municipalities, and we obviously want the best turnout that we can get, and we'll do whatever we can to ensure that the message is getting out, the importance of voting, and our mayor and councillors are very good at that as well, in trying to encourage and getting the vote out, and we'll continue to do that. I think with the electronic telephone voting system, I think it's an option that should increase voter turnout. It's going to make it very easy, especially if you think of, say, students in university right now in October. That you don't have to get home to vote. You have 12 days to either go on your telephone or go on the internet with your PIN and cast your vote. So it makes it very easy for I think of people working away, people traveling. I really think that we're going to be able to get more of those people out to the polls, get their vote in a very easy fashion. I really do believe, and we see it even in visits to our municipal offices now. I mean, people are just not getting out as much as they would, even in these fairly good conditions that we're in right now. So if things do get worse as far as the pandemic, that could increase the reluctance of people to get out into large gatherings. So, but we do have that system in place, and we're going to make that. Get the information out as best we can and make it as user-friendly as we possibly can. Of course, all of these discussions have come about as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, but I'm wondering if you feel that there could be practical applications for these types of voting beyond the coronavirus period. Absolutely. The bylaw is specific to this election. Because we did not know where we were going forward, but it certainly is a great test for us. I believe that most municipalities now are using electronic telephone voting, and so it's a natural progression to where we are at right now from the paper ballot system. So we do believe it is a dry run, and maybe depending on the success, we'll look at how to make that better. Do we need both the paper ballot and the electronic telephone system? Many municipalities have gone to the one system now. So we'll look at all those things, but ultimately it'll be a decision of the next council that's in place after this election. So what will the town be doing from here on in to get the word out to Port Hawkesbury residents, not just about the e-voting and phone voting options, but about the election itself? This is really very new to us. We really, the bylaw is in place on June 24th. We have our contracts in place as of this week. Our electors lists, our agreements are in place to coming to us by the end of this month. So everything is coming together very, very quickly. There certainly will be resources for people to be able to access information. We will have a a telephone line if people have an issue to get information. There is also web resources that people can go on and look, and that will get out to the public in relatively short order. Our time is getting fairly short right now, so that will be coming fairly soon.
Well, I'd like to thank you, Terry, for joining us on Telile 24/7 this week to explain just how voting is going to unfold in Port Hawkesbury for this fall's municipal elections. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Adam. It was a pleasure to be able to speak to the issue. I think the council feel strongly that this is a good decision. As you mentioned, it was really a uniform voice coming out and supporting our initiative, and we're kind of excited about learning something new, getting a new option out to our electors, and we're looking forward to this election.
In just a month's time, schools across Richmond County, around the Strait region, and all over Nova Scotia are going to reopen. And many students and teachers are still trying to figure out just how that's all going to look in the time of COVID-19. But in the meantime, recent graduates of Richmond County schools are still basking in the glow of a special celebration that took place all over the county at the end of June. And it could be coming back next year and in years to come. I sat down with some of the organizers of that event and one of the students who took part. Here's that interview right now. And I'm very pleased to have with me today two of the main organizers for the Richmond Grad Procession of 2020. We're welcoming Brandy Potty from her home in Capelgette, and we're also welcoming Carol Ann Wilson from her home in St. Peters, and joining us is one of the grads that took part in the procession, Alex Wilson, Carol Ann's daughter. Thank you, all of you, for joining in today.
Thank you, Adam.
All right.
Thank you.
Good to have you all here. And let's get things started at the very beginning. So obviously we knew as schools shut down and as COVID-19 swept through that things were going to be very different in terms of how students were going to wrap up their grade 12 year, and the possibility that things would be very different in terms of actual graduation celebrations. So I want to start with you, Brandy, if I could. How did the whole idea of the grad procession through Richmond County get started?
I think it was probably a month and a half before the actual procession. Alana had contacted me along with other parents in the community just to try and figure out some idea that might be motivating for our grads to participate in and include the community. So hatch the idea of the grad procession. And that's really that was the inception. Yeah.
Carol Ann, what did you think of the idea when it first came about? What was your immediate reaction?
At first, I wasn't sure, in all honesty, just because the logistics of everything. But as time went on and we kind of, got a lot of questions answered, it was a great idea. It was an opportunity to get the grads out there and for the communities to celebrate with them. So I thought it was a great idea. Yeah.
Alex, I want to shift this to you quickly because obviously, you as a graduate are at the heart of all of this. So what did you feel like, first of all, as schools were shutting down and you realized you were going to have to do your education from home, but then as you also realized that the grad year that you envisioned and the grad celebrations you envisioned wouldn't be happening the same way either? What did that feel like to you?
It was really difficult because for a long time during high school, you see other people graduate and you see other people have these big ceremonies, and it came to a point where we realized that school wasn't going to be coming back and we weren't going to have the opportunity to have those type of celebrations. So we kind of come to terms with not having a celebration at all. And then when they had announced that the grad procession was happening, it was kind of a nice, not the same as a graduation, but it was great to have the communities come together and great to have all the students come together to have a celebration of us.
Mm. And we've talked a little bit about this, and any of you can jump in on this question, but not only did you folks get great uptake from students and also from their parents and from the various drivers that were making this procession from Petit de Gras straight through into St. Peters, but also you also had a lot of help from a lot of people that came on as sponsors. And we're not going to list them individually right here, but can either of you speak to just the idea that the idea caught on like wildfire about having a grad procession and people really got behind it?
Yeah, it was wonderful. I know in my area, the sponsors that I'd contacted, they didn't even have to hear the entire spiel. They were just, we want to take part and we want to sponsor and we want to help in any way we can. So it was heartwarming to see organizations step up and say, let us do what we can to help this this procession be a success. So for me, it was a wonderful experience to reach out and have people be overwhelmed. Yeah, overwhelming support.
Yeah, I agree. It was. I mean, I wasn't surprised that we got the support from the businesses because they're all usually so supportive anyway. But they just seemed to be more on board and just felt for the grads that they weren't getting what they deserved, for their graduation, and just wanted to help out wherever they could. And this was just their way that they could contribute to that celebration for them. So it was phenomenal. Yeah.
That's wonderful. So let's go to the actual day. This was the last Saturday in June, and the weather was kind of on and off that day. There was a little rain involved in the celebration, but I'm wondering, can any of you describe the scene? And I'd like to start with you, Alex, if I could, because just the idea that you're getting into the vehicles with, I understand, 33 other graduates from both École Beauport, but also Richmond Academy. What was that like? Was that chaotic? Was that just kind of crazy? Was it a big wild adventure? What did you think as you were getting ready to actually embark on this crazy journey?
Well, we had gotten there pretty early, so we got to see everybody pulling in, and we got to see how beautifully decorated everybody's cars were. It was just like everyone that went through, you could see everybody was so excited and so happy to get this on the go. And when we had actually gotten on the road and started to go through, I was amazed by how many people had came out to support us. There was people banging pots, there was people waving, and you could recognize the people as you went, and it was a great moment. It was really good.
There seemed to be a lot of people in the different communities, and I mean, I got to see the parade going through Louisdale and through River Bourgeois and St. Peter's. My Telile colleague Becky Borono was on site in Arishat, so we've got the footage from Isle Madame. What did it feel like to you, not just to have the procession going through, but also to see that people were really gathering along the side of the road and cheering the grads on?
It was amazing. It was, even in spots where people couldn't get out, or maybe because of the weather had changed, there were balloons everywhere, there were little decorations everywhere. So even in spots where people couldn't physically get out to watch the parade or the procession, they still had their properties decorated. So it was just an amazing show of support. It was just phenomenal. For me as a parent, I was overwhelmed, and even at points, and I'm sure Brandy can say the same for Lauren, at points Alex was totally overwhelmed. So it was just amazing to see the support that they had received. So that there were people that were just legitimately felt bad that the grads didn't get what they had worked so hard to achieve, right, to get the recognition for that. So it was amazing. Yeah.
Randy, can I throw that to you? What was that like for you and for your daughter Lauren, who was part of the procession, to see the people out there, and a lot of businesses with signs up as well congratulating the grads?
Yeah, I'm still, when Alex started talking, I got kind of goosebumps up my spine. And as we're reminiscing, I'm still a little teary-eyed about it, being honest, because I was overwhelmed. The communities that came out, the people that were just so excited to see our kids and to celebrate with them, to actually have this time to celebrate with our kids that they are not normally given that opportunity. And I think for a lot of people, when we came into River Bourgeois, and it was torrential at that point, you could hear the thunder and lightning in the background, and we're driving through, and we still have people standing out with their pots and their pans. St. Peter's was and I mean, everybody was, but it was torrential downpour at this point, and people still stood out. It was amazing. We had so many, wonderful groups of people just waiting for these grads to arrive. So I still kind of tear a little bit. Yeah, not gonna lie. And our car was electrified. Yeah.
Sounds like there was a lot of enthusiasm. And yeah, you're right. I mean, I was there with my own camera in River Bourgeois, and I mean, people were waiting for upwards of 20 minutes to half an hour for the procession to come through, and their spirit didn't get dampened by the rain at all. They were really excited. I want to ask the three of you here, what do you think all of this says about Richmond County and about the unanimity that happens around the county. The idea that it doesn't matter whether you're from Petty de Gras or Janbrins Island or Lewisdale or Grand Anse or Johnstown or St. Peter's or Lordways, you know, everybody gets together and celebrates when something like this happens.
The people of Richmond County, and it really doesn't matter what they're called to do, they accept the call. Whether it's a benefit for families who've lost a home, or if it's benefits for families that have been sick, or it's an occasion that's, you know, one like this is a celebration. The communities in Richmond County support their people. Yeah.
Yeah. Your thoughts, Carol Ann and Alex, I want to get the thought from you as a student as well, too. What do you feel about being from Richmond County when you see all this type of thing happening?
Well, it was just insane because you, like, as a student, you might not know everybody in Richmond County, but they feel like they know you, and every person we went by, even if they didn't recognize you, they were screaming for you, they were cheering for you, and it just shows you that it doesn't matter who you are, where you live. If you're in Richmond County, you are treated the same, and everybody will appreciate it.
The benefits was that they had their name on the side of the car, so everybody knew who was in the car. So it gave an extra little personalized message, because they weren't just saying yay, they were saying yay Alex, because her name was there, and they might not have known her because she's not from Discoos or from Petty de Gras, but they knew. So it really did. Yeah, I feel it really meant something.
You all get to feel like rock stars for a day, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think too, I mean, you know that you live in a rural community, and you know that you could call on your neighbor if you need to. And this was just an example of how, so if it's, so everybody knows somebody, right? So we live in St. Peter's, but we have connections to Ayrshire and Almadam. So everybody knows somebody. So whether they may not know, say, Alex in particular, they may know a relative and say, oh, that's so-and-so's niece, or that's, you know what I mean? So they can make a connection somewhere along the lines. And I think that's a part of living in small communities. So you know that the feelings are legitimate, that they are legitimately happy and want to just, do what they can to help support them, right? So I think that's the underlying thing with living in small communities, is that support is there, like as Brandy said, for whatever the occasion.
Definitely. So Alex, I want to ask you personally, what happens to you now in terms of your education? Where do you go from here?
I will be going to Acadia University in Wolfville, taking a Bachelor of Science in Psychology in the fall.
Okay, that's terrific. Good luck to you. My wife is an Acadia alumni, so she'll be very happy to hear that. But I wanted to ask you, do you feel like you'll carry this experience forward to you? Is this going to be something that you'll be saying to your fellow Acadia students, whether online or in person in the future, to say, yeah, this is what my county did for me?
Yeah, definitely. Because I feel like there's certain places that didn't get an experience like this, that it was too many people to be able to do something like this. And I feel like it shows you how great of a place Richmond County is, and that it's a thing to be bragged about. So
that's wonderful. As we're heading into the home stretch here, everybody, I want to ask, because when I spoke to you folks on the actual day of the procession, I got the feeling that this might not be the last time that we see a grad procession for Richmond County, whether or not the pandemic is still going through the following June. Do you get the sense that we might have the seeds of a new tradition and an annual occurrence here in terms of the procession?
I think so. I really do. I think other parents will step up, and I mean, Alana was one of the leaders in this for this particular one. I feel that she'll carry it forward as well, and I do feel that there will be parents that will step up, and we've laid the groundwork. There might be some things that they wouldn't do the same, or even for us, I'm sure Brandon would say the same, is if we had to do this again, there'd probably be things we would change, and maybe not, but I really do think that you'll see another one next year.
Brandy, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it was a great foundation that we laid. There is a ton of other things that can be done to kind of build on this, but this foundation. So, we talked about there could be a barbecue afterwards. There could be fireworks. I mean, we were under some really strict guidelines as far as social distancing and a limit of numbers. But when that is lifted, the sky is the limit for what can be done with this event. And I think taking away from all of this is the first time that the communities are involved in this. And this is what I feel was what made it such a huge success, having the communities come out. Our kids have been graduating for centuries, but to have the communities be brought into this is lovely. What made it really lovely. It was successful, because of it. So I feel like this is the groundwork we've established, but there's lots of room to grow.
One last question to you, and answer this any way you want to. This is all coming at interesting timing. We found out from the Minister of Education this week just how schools are going to reopen in the fall, not just here in Richmond, but across the province. Just any thoughts from any of you on the plan to bring students back, and looking at what you've been through in terms of having the schools shut down? Do any of you have any thoughts on that just before we wrap up here?
You have to make the best of what is handed to you. And I think for these grads, this was a true example of that. We knew that this wasn't going to be the fireworks show that they had anticipated when we thought about graduation. We knew that this was not going to come close to what they had worked up to from probably, grade 7 till grade 12. They had visions of what their dresses were going to look like and all these events that were going to happen around them and celebrating them. And we know that sometimes life gives you lemons and you have to make the best of it. You have to and I think we've taught our children that even through all of these things that have happened, there are still opportunities to learn, and there's still opportunities to embrace what's going on in their lives. So I think, aside from just having the procession, this is life lessons. These are life lessons that we have given our kids. Maybe Alex, you're going one way and maybe it'll turn another way, and that's the way that you're intended to go. So I think it's just giving kids an opportunity to see that we have to change the lens we look at things.
Yeah, and I think it's for all of the kids. I mean, for the graduates as they go forward, it's been a very difficult year. They've had to make a lot of different adjustments, both socially, mentally, and in their education. So I think that it's made them better people. It's made them more more adaptable. They know that they worked through a very difficult time, and I think it's going to help some of them be better able to deal with any difficulties that come ahead, because they've had to change so much and because they've had so many rules and so many regulations placed on them, that I think that it's going to make them better able to cope with some things as they're going for, even with the kids that will be going back to high school or back to elementary school. I think it's been difficult for all of the kids, and I think that come what may in September, I think that I think they'll probably be ready to deal with it, because they've already had to deal with it, because they've already experienced it, that whatever happens, it's going to be less difficult for them. I think that's my opinion.
Building resiliency.
Yeah.
That's my word. I couldn't think of it.
What is it? What's the quote? The best view comes from the hardest climb. So that's a really great, we have to just embrace what it is, and it's going to be difficult in September. Absolutely. They're starting off the year on that foot, which is different than ending the year. So kids are going into grade 12 starting off with, having all of these restrictions put on them, and these may continue throughout the whole year. So it's a whole, your whole senior year is under the umbrella of COVID. So again, it's important for parents to just, create that resiliency.
As Brandy said, they're starting off the year differently than what our grade 12 started off with. So it's going to be, it will be difficult for them, but I think they can handle it. I think they'll work with what they have and show their resiliency.
Yeah. Yeah, resiliency, definitely the word for 2020 at this point, yes.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground here in a short time. I appreciate all of you coming on board with me here. Did you want to add anything else about all this before we wrap up?
Again, just saying thanks to the communities of Richmond County and coming out and supporting our grads. Without their support, this would not have been as successful as it has been. So yeah, abundance of gratitude for that.
Right on. Okay.
Definitely.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, I want to thank all of you and congratulations to all of you and everybody that was with you for a moment that we'll never forget and a moment that it sounds like might just come back year after year to be part of Richmond County's high school graduation traditions. Thank you all so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
All right. We've been speaking with Brandy Potty from Cape Auguette and with Carol Ann Wilson and Alex Wilson from St. Peter's. And that wraps up this week's edition of Telile 24/7. Thank you for joining me, and a special thanks to all my interview guests and to my Telile colleagues Becky Borono and Nick Boudreau for their assistance on this week's episode. If you have any suggestions or ideas for future shows, or if you'd just like to comment on what you're seeing here, you can always contact me directly. You can email me, adamjrcook@gmail.com. You can phone my direct line, 902-625-8863. And you can call Telile's head office. That number is 902-226-1928. Don't forget to follow Telile on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you go to our YouTube channel, you can see every single episode of Telile 24/7, including this one. You can also see individual stories and special features from the show. And you can see a lot of great new material that's been produced by my Telile colleagues in just the last few months. For now, I'm Adam Cook. Thank you for joining me. We'll see you next week with a brand new edition of Telile 24/7.